Okay, I think we'll get going and as people join us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our webinar exploring the journey of lived experience in the legal assistance change project. Really delighted to be collaborating with Community Legal WA on this webinar. Hi, I'm Rachel Seward. I'm Deputy CEO of WACOS, and I'll facilitating the session and doing an intro and then handing over to the community legal team. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that certainly and I think the majority and our presenters are on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, acknowledging this land was never ceded. It's in fact stolen land, and we have a lot of unfinished business. And as a community sector, I know that all of you are also, like WACOS, committed to addressing that unfinished business. Also acknowledging that we're in the second month of Jilbar, which is a transition season. It's the second rainy season, apparently. Although as warming, and it's the transition season as we move into slightly warmer weather, and but still with some frequent rain, as I'm sure we all have noticed. Today we'll be hearing from Chelsea McKenny, Rhiann Chin, and Rochelle Allison Moore. This project, Community Legal WA has been working on this project for some time, dreamt it up quite some time ago, didn't you, Chelsea? It was really hard to get this project up and running. So first off, we'll hear from Chelsea, and Chelsea is the CEO of Community Legal WA. She has a passion for social justice, and anybody that has met Chelsea will know that very, very well. She's particularly leading the work in Community Legal WA in sector development advocacy, with a focus on better laws and policies and a strong, high quality and sustainable C&C sector. She believes in the power of working together, enabling people with lived experience to contribute their work and expertise to address systemic problems, so that we can all access the resources and essential services to enable our needs and human rights to be met. Then we'll be hearing from Rhiann Chin, who leads sector development in Community Legal WA, working to strengthen collaboration and build workforce capacity and capability across community legal services. With a background in aged care advocacy, quality and community development, she's passionate about quality, people-first solutions that make a lasting difference. And then we'll be hearing from Rochelle Allison Moore, who leads the Lived Experience Project at Community Legal, where she works alongside people to make sure their voices shape the services and systems that impact their lives. With her own lived experience and years spent supporting people in crisis, she's passionate about creating approaches that are practical, compassionate, and truly responsive to community needs. And I think you'll find for all of these three people, all those qualities are going to shine through in this presentation. So without further ado, Chelsea, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Rachel. So I think, Rochelle, you're sharing the slides, so we'll just wait a moment for that to come up. But while we're doing that, I would also like to acknowledge that I'm sitting on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, pay my respects to elders past, present, and yes, this land was never ceded, and as Rachel says, there's a lot of unfinished business that we all need to embrace. I might just, in the interest of time, I might just start chatting. Oh, here we go with the slides. So before we move on to the substantive component of the workshop, I would also like to recognise people with lived experience and the contributions that they make at an individual and a collective level, and acknowledge intersecting experiences. Our shorthand is lived experience, as in past experiences, but we also attend to the needs of people whose experiences are ongoing and that they are still living. People with lived experience have a vital contribution, and we need to find ways to involve them at all levels, and we value the courage of those who share this unique perspective for the purpose of us all learning and growing together so that we can achieve better outcomes for everyone. Next slide, please, Rochelle. It's tricky when you're not doing your own slides, isn't it? So I just wanted to start with a bit about the why and why it was important in this sector as well. So I came to Community Legal WA as the new CEO 4 years ago, and it was such an honour to join a sector that I'd admired from a distance for so long. But the background to this, I'm not a lawyer, so I've got a community development background. And the background to this project in particular is that I'd come from working in mental health at the WA Association for Mental Health. And during my 7 years there, the biggest learnings for me were from people with lived and living experience. And it wasn't an area that I'd really touched much before, but I found that it really accorded with my existing values around fairness and rights, and I grew to be like super excited about lived experience work. At WAM, those practices were still emerging. Lived experience was embedded in the board and was being integrated into our operations. But at the time, this is a decade ago, right? We were still figuring out how to do it well. And for me, I was trying, but really, I didn't know what I was doing. I made a lot of mistakes. And I also experienced really great generosity from many lived experience leaders, advocates, and peer workers who took the time and care to bring me and other members of the team on that journey, on a collective journey. And I want to particularly acknowledge Margaret Doherty and Kerry Hawkins as mentors and inspirers at that time. In my working life, 30 years in the community sector, some of the most frank and hard to hear feedback, but meaningful feedback I have experienced was from a lived experience leader who called me out in really important ways. And the upshot is that I believe we have an ethical responsibility, all of us, to meaningfully involve the people that our sectors are here for. We're here for them, after all, and we need to know what matters from their experiences, their values, their goals. And so for me, it's an ethical stance, but it's also a pragmatic one. It delivers great outcomes in services and advocacy. And so there are really practical reasons to do this work as well. So then I came to CLWA, and in the legal sector, involving people with lived experience was not yet part of that work very much. And I confess, I was like, where are the people that we're here for? And I really missed that. We have amazing social justice advocates in the CLC sector, committed lawyers who, just across like the rest of this community sector, give up good pay elsewhere for meaningful work. So the passion is there. But other than client feedback surveys taken at the service level, at the time there was very little in the way, no networks and communities, no established mechanisms, and very little in the way of policy commitments or try, test and learn at CLWA, in many of our members or in government to involve or co-design with people. And so as I'd seen the power of this work before, I wanted to move away at CLWA from primarily hearing from experts by profession towards hearing from experts through lived experience. It took a little while, but we decided to get started. And long story short, the CLWA showed great leadership and committed to spend quite a small proportion of our savings to hire Marisha, who became the first designated lived experience worker that we know of in a CLC organisation in Australia. Next slide, please. Rochelle, I've got too many things open on my screen. So I'd really like to reflect on getting started. Part of it was ripping off the Band-Aid and, focusing on the question, what can we do? Having an optimistic, purpose-focused mindset rather than focusing on the barriers and challenges, because it's fair to say that this work does carry risks and it's not always easy. So getting started, sometimes small steps. Marisha, our first worker, designated worker started with us 11 hours a week for, I think, a 9-month contract, because that's what we could afford. And so it's okay to start small, but just be honest about that. It was a bit scary. We had nothing specific about lived experience in place when we started, but we did have some really important foundations. One of the lived experience leaders that I'd learned from before, and this is burned into my brain, this is one of the most important things, is that Tracy said, you don't need to be perfect, you need to be good, and being trauma-informed enough is okay. So that comes into that risk stuff that we'll talk a little bit more about later. You know, we had a clear purpose. Our why is around fair access to justice for people in WA. And so for me, again, drawing on that kind of moral imperative, lived experience voices inherently matter, and seeing that they're powerful enablers of change, that pragmatic outcome was really important for me. You can also draw on the lived expertise that is available in other sectors. There are many sectors who are quite well advanced in that work. So we brought them in to help us learn and think and use that existing expertise and go, well, how do we translate that into this sector? That is different because lawyers work in different ways to some other parts of the community sector. So you can lean on the stuff that's out there. And the WACOS framework's a great example of one of the existing frameworks that's out there, and translate that and adapt that to your own place. And then finally, building trust with lived experience communities and people is a really important foundation. It did help us that we had hired a worker who had existing networks and relationships and was able to bring those into our space. Next slide, please, Rochelle. So some of the first steps into organisational readiness, and these are things that you can do too, and I think that they really do translate across sectors. I took them from another sector and applied them here at CLWA. So getting started with that open mind and open heart, and that optimistic question around what can we do is really important. And be prepared for the feedback that will come. You know, one of the beautiful things about many lived experience advocates is that they are advocates by nature and they will give you feedback, but there is also a generosity of spirit because we're all learning, and that's okay. And then as we started to think about this organisational readiness, we came to understand that your organisational culture is the foundation for this work. So at CLWA, we had already built a culture where different perspectives were valued. We were open to different ways of doing things, safety to challenge within the team, you know, including the boss, like I love being challenged by the team, and a learning culture, like always asking, how can we do better? Feedback's a gift. And then the other thing, and I think this was really important when you only have, you know, at the time, one designated lived experience role, was that knowing that all of our staff are human, we share our lives, we all have various lived or living experiences, and still seeing that designated worker as a colleague first and foremost, not just or only a person with lived experience. So a leadership style that I've already mentioned that carries those inherent values around fairness and challenging power and being okay to be vulnerable, not needing to know all the answers, I think has been a really important part of openness to doing this work and receptiveness in the community. Commitment, you've got to have commitment somewhere in the organisation. You can start ground up, but our experience has been that it's helpful to have commitment from the board with that small investment of savings and from senior leadership, because that paves the way. Some resources. This work isn't free. It's important that we pay people with lived expertise for that expertise. And so some form of a budget is really helpful. I think it is ideal to have a designated lived experience worker. Remember, we started with 11 hours a week, but the minimum is another worker who's got time and skills, as long as you've got a budget for that lived experience payments and that worker has that real openness to co-design and learning. You need a policy that guides your team, sets out your payments, but there's loads of examples of that available. And some training, there are existing trainers out there that bring together your team to think about what does this mean for us as an organisation. And then the other thing I would like to emphasise is that openness to risk. So there is inherent risk in involving people with lived experience in your work, because often these people carry trauma. They might be disappointed with the outcomes that you provide. And sometimes I think the old culture is, these people are so vulnerable. And yes, we don't want to traumatise them again, but we can fall into being a bit paternalistic. So we need to be comfortable with a bit of risk, that we can set up trauma-informed processes to involve people, and Rochelle will manage that. But allow people to take that choice. It's very healing for some people, and that dignity of risk for them, that they might want to participate, even if these processes might be triggering for them. I think I've seen that in clinical settings in mental health and a little bit in our sector, that there is a real caution around that triggering or re-traumatising people. So you've just got to explore the risk around that. So that's my quick little summary. I guess the 3 key points for me are: small steps matter. Ask, how can we get started, or how can we further this along? Do it well enough. Be trauma-informed enough. You don't have to be perfect. That was a really empowering, clear message and learning for me. And you can draw on the existing frameworks and expertise out there. There are incredible lived experience leaders and advocates who will want to work with you and can help you on this journey. I'm going to hand over now, I think, to Rochelle.
Thanks, Chelsea. Just checking everyone can hear me. Okay. Chelsea, I can only see you. Can you nod if you can hear me? Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. So hi, everyone. Welcome. And thanks for joining us today. So I am the project lead for the Lived Experience of Legal Assistance Change project. It is quite a mouthful. Within community legal, we affectionately call it LELA for short. And I guess before I go any further, it's probably important to clarify what we mean and what I'm talking about when I say lived experience within the legal assistance sector and within the project context. And so when I'm talking about lived experience, I mean people who have had a legal problem and needed help from the legal assistance sector. They may not have necessarily received that help, unfortunately, but if they've had that legal issue and they've needed help, then they're falling into our lived experience definition, if you like. So as Chelsea said, I hold a designated lived experience role. So I bring both, I guess, project leadership and my own experience of needing legal help. And that perspective helps me to really make sure the voices of people with legal need and the people who use these services are central to everything we do. So the project was established, excuse me, to build and strengthen initiatives that, I guess, to bring lived experience into the heart of the legal assistance sector. And we wanted to do that by building a community of people with lived experience to contribute their experience and insights and to help the way we do things, not only within the organisation at CLWA, but to improve service delivery and design with community legal centres and across the sector, and also advocate for change at more of a systemic level. We also want to provide learning and engagement opportunities so that CLCs can include people with lived experience in their work, and they can do that by working alongside each other in a safe and supported and meaningful way. and also extend and strengthen the initiatives that include lived experience right throughout the sector. So those were kind of the goals or the aims of the project. Ultimately, you know, a big outcome, and not necessarily of this project, but I mean, the goal would be where lived experience is recognised right throughout the sector as expertise, and where the services are shaped through co-design and with genuine partnership with the people who use those services. And then at a more systemic level, where that change can make access to justice fairer and more responsive. However, I acknowledge Rome wasn't built in a day, and so we take small steps to work in that direction, and those small steps are really important and meaningful. We also wanted to do this with really strong foundations. Chelsea mentioned a little bit about the risk. So from the outset, we've really built in training, readiness and wellbeing measures, so that participation from our lived experience community feels empowering. Sorry, now I've got to try and multitask. Let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. So one of the most exciting parts for me has been building a community of people with lived experience. We asked if people wanted to be involved, and they came. It was a little bit overwhelming with how many people we've had express interest in being a part of this project. And we've really seen, I guess, incredible willingness from people with lived experience to participate in focus groups and interviews and surveys and speaking opportunities and media opportunities that we've been able to provide. This is our lived experience co-design working group, and we established the group towards the end of last year to help guide what they saw as the project priorities, and advise community legal and the sector on the issues that matter most. They've helped us develop tools like we had a turnaway survey that ran recently, which captured why people are unable to access legal help, and the impact that that had on their lives. And they've also they've actually been very busy. There's a high demand for this group and the advice and services that they're able to give. I guess not services, but the expertise that they bring is. They're such a diverse group with diverse experience, and it's become part of the Community Legal WA family, which is beautiful. And yeah, so from my experience, this group has become part of our team, you know, an extension of our team. And the community legal team have certainly made them feel very welcomed, included, and a part of. And I guess the other part for me that was important was I really wanted to offer different levels of engagement for this project. So not everyone wants to speak in an event, for an example, or contribute to a media story. Some people would prefer contributing to a survey, or doing smaller group work. And and, you know, there may be several reasons for that. Some might be personal reasons, and others we've found as I guess something to point out specific to this sector is that sometimes people can't actually share much of their story because of confidentiality concerns within their legal issue. So it was important for me to make sure that we had people that can engage in a variety of different ways that felt supportive and engaging. So hang on, I've got to multitask again, sorry. So within the organisation, you know, one of the goals was to start to embed some of the practice of lived experience into the organisation. And a lot of this work had been done before I came on board in June of 2024. And that was through the hard work of Marisha and Chelsea. And I guess from my perspective, coming into a team that had already done some of that work, I've really found the culture to really embrace that meaningful collaboration. So I often meet with different teams within CLWA, so our advocacy and policy team, communications team, and we really work together on how we can work with each other and include each other in our work, which is fabulous. So as I said earlier, we designed a turnaway survey, and that was in conjunction with the policy and advocacy team, and just the openness of doing that with our group, the patience it took, and the willingness to really learn. And the person who did that was, went for a ride on this journey, and he was open throughout the whole way. And the results we got from that were fabulous. That's now been extended into a bigger project, which I haven't got time to talk about here because I could talk about this project all day long. So I guess I will move on to, I've just got on the slide to advocacy for lived experience voices and systemic reform. And Chelsea and the advocacy team and Rianne have been absolute champions at trying to get lived experience voices within reforms, not only within the state, but nationally. So last week we were in Canberra and we had a meeting to discuss national reforms and how we could include the lived experience voice into that. So there's some really exciting work going on. In regards to the sector, so to initially launch this project, we, at our first member engagement forum, so every 6 months, Community Legal has a member engagement forum where all of community legals have the opportunity to come together, collaborate and workshop. And so we included a session there where we asked centres to think about how lived experience could be part of their own service design. And we found within that group champions who are really willing to lead this work in the sector. And we also, it was a great opportunity to discuss some of the barriers that can get in the way of including lived experience voices in the work. So from there, we established a project reference group, and that consists of both sector representatives from different community legal centres, also legal aid, and we have some lived experience voices within that group as well. And they've been really fundamental to helping us understand the issues within the sector and the issues potentially facing us of including this work, lived experience work into their day-to-day work. And they've also helped us to understand, some of the barriers and how we might overcome them. So the group has been such a valuable source of information. And one of the things that I guess we've had to be quite flexible with is in the initial planning for the project, we were hoping to do 5 to 6 pilot projects with community legal centres and other organisations within the sector. And that we thought would look like, supporting those organisations to recruit their own co-design groups, educating the sector about co-design and really supporting them to work together to include that co-design work into their service design or delivery. The feedback we've got is that we really want to do this work and we really understand the importance, and we've got people who really care about this, but we don't have the resources and we don't have the time. So, and we also don't have the organisational readiness or preparedness to do this work. And so one thing we've done to work around that is our co-design steering group have been going into community legal centres and working on these pilot projects. So it's been a way of, I guess, collaboratively working with community legal centres to be able to do this important work while recognising the resources available. It's very exciting. Tomorrow we're actually heading out to Midland to advise on on client spaces and rooms and how they can be more user-friendly and engaging for clients. So those are the kinds of things the group's doing. But as I said, they've got a bit of a waiting list in terms of the work that needs to be done. So I guess that's also been one of the challenges of this work, is that obviously with being flexible and working with community legal centres to include this, the lived experience voice into co-design, that's using up our resources and our time as well. So we're really trying hard to be flexible, to really progress with this really important work, while also recognising that we do have limited time and resources. There's some unique aspects of the legal centre that I have found. So in my previous roles, I have done this type of work before, but the project work I've done previously has been in other sectors like drug and alcohol and suicide prevention. So they're quite different sectors to navigate to the legal assistance sector. So one of the first things I learnt was that when you're a peak body for community legal centres, the legal problems people have are very diverse. They rarely exist in isolation, and there's a lot of intersectionality that comes with that. Also, when you're talking about diverse legal problems, you might have a housing issue, there might be a financial issue, maybe there's a family legal issue. So when we want to include lived experience voices within the sector, we're really talking about a lot of different areas of law as well, which really brings some interesting complexity into this work. And at the moment, we certainly don't have all the answers, but we are working through and really trying to work in a space where we can see the opportunities that exist out there at the moment that are more broad rather than dealing with different types of law. Also, you know, in the legal assistance sector, the stakes are really high and there's huge risk of re-traumatisation. And what we're finding is that people are having to tell their stories over and over and over and over again, which is really quite re-traumatises them each time. And the stakes are really high of not getting perhaps the help or all of the help that they need at one time. And you know, there's loss of children, loss of housing. The stakes are really, really high. I'm just checking on time too, and I apologise, I'm just going over a bit. So Rihanna will stop shortly. Also, the legal assistance sector has very strong rules. It's very rules-based and it's not very collaborative. Normally, if someone seeks advice or needs representation, it's very directive on how that's going to go. And it's also very adversarial. So there's winners and losers, right? It's very, yeah, you're a winner or a loser. And as I said, the consequences can be really extreme, life-changing. And we're also looking at confidentiality. So there's, I recognise in other sectors there are risks around confidentiality, but the risks with the legal assistance sector are particularly unique and challenging. In saying all of that, though, I just really wanted to say that the outcomes that we're seeing so far, and we've still got some more time on this project, but what we're finding is that we've got a growing community of lived experience advocates who are feeling really confident and supported to contribute. We've never had a problem in getting people to in finding people to contribute in the way that we've been asking. Organisational shifts at Community Legal WA and our member centres, where lived experience is increasingly recognised as expertise, which is delightful. And there's been some sector-wide momentum with champions emerging. Systemic issues are starting to be addressed in partnership with lived experience voices. So, at the beginning I did say Rome wasn't built in a day, but these are pretty fantastic outcomes in such a short time. So, yeah, I think we're doing well to start creating that momentum. Thanks, Rhiannon. Sorry, I went over a bit there.
Thank you, Rochelle. It's very welcome to go over. I think it's absolutely the most important part that we're talking about. My contribution here is probably going to be slightly briefer, but I did want to take the opportunity, I guess, to reflect on my own experience of working with, having in the team, embedding lived experience or practitioners, and perhaps that there's some unexpected, unintended benefits to really making that commitment that Chelsea said of having these designated roles in the team. So for me, when I joined Community Legal WA, I was both new to the legal assistance sector and I guess what I would call formal lived experience practice. I think, as Rachel touched on, my background was older persons advocacy and quality. So I was well used to advocating for power to be retained within a service user or an older person, and to make sure that consumer feedback is involved in service design. But the sectors that I guess were Chelsea's point of reference, that mental health, drug and alcohol, where these sectors that have really been pioneers of lived experience practice, were quite new to me. And I think in reflecting here, like, I want to acknowledge that point of often it's not feasible to maybe have a lived experience person, that we're in a sector where we're all doing the very best we can with very limited resources. But this is me here to say that if you can have a designated lived experience role in your team, it's well worth it. Just in terms of that first slide, that's like acknowledging again that if we can do this, we should do this. It's like, if we're here in a social justice organisation, the people we're here to help should be central to what we do. They should be designing services, and the idea that this, whilst in practice this is a project, and unfortunately it does have like at this point in time limited funding, the perspective is not that it's a project or a bolt-on, it's actually central to everything we do. I think, and if you could change the slide, Rochelle. Rochelle has talked about some of the amazing things she's done. I've been so lucky to be able to step into a team in a culture that was well established, that valued lived experience. But from my point of view, working from and learning from Marisha and Rochelle and now Kerry in the team has brought something really quite special. And so I've titled this slide as My Challenges, because I think like, we all come with our own working practices and assumptions and learnings, and often what we do, because we've got to get a job done and a project delivered and outputs for funders and all of this sort of thing, which doesn't always go that well with slowing down. And early parts of the project were conversations. So some of the project reference group that Rochelle has talked about, we worked with legal aid who'd done some work there, but we had a very frank conversation about what we call co-design, and is this co-design, is this co-development? But I think what I've seen in Rochelle's practice particularly is this deep expertise in co-design practice, and that, as Chelsea said at the beginning, this is worth doing. If we want really good outcomes, we all benefit. But my other reflection in terms of having Rochelle or someone with lived experience in a designated role in the team is that your whole organisation and culture benefits from that, because they are sitting behind you in your office, you turn around and you get that perspective all of the time. The turnaways information and survey that Rochelle talked about, really that came about because we were sitting talking about what we were planning around a team meeting, and Rochelle, within that practice of being curious and what is this and what's the opportunity, saw an opportunity to involve lived experience voices. And I talked to Rochelle about that, and I said, oh, I'd really love how you do that and how you always see that opportunity. And her response was very much, well, I don't actually think about doing that. It's just the practice that I bring. But it's been such a gift to the organisation to have that sitting around the table. I realised I put this in as a challenge, but it's not a challenge. But I think for all of us, it's hard yards often in this sector of trying to connect with the why and do as much as we can with such limited resources, and the need to keep delivering, to keep having the resources to do the good work, that having that voice to challenge that and make that better is well worth doing if you can. Next slide. So I think I've probably jumped on to benefits, but a couple of the images I've showed you as we've come through, I guess if the first one was Rochelle and a lived experience we speak of it very early on, some of the work in terms of finding a safe way for people with lived experience to work in the media, again, was in a team induction, sit down with the communications or strategic communications coordinator and start a conversation about how can we support people to safely tell their stories. And that's just grown and grown. This is a picture from Rochelle and Chantal at National Conference just recently, which was, as you can see in the audience, really, really popular way of something that here's a solution to something that we really want to do because that's how we are as a sector, but we just can't find the way to do it. And having that person in the team has meant that we've been able to find these solutions that we didn't necessarily have before we had somebody in here for a reasonably significant amount of time. And then lastly, because I do want to give people the opportunity to ask questions, so if you could give me my last slide. Look, this change, we are still at the very beginning of a journey. We're very, very fortunate, but I think many people are the feedback from community legal services that I've had from leaders has been, we know that this stuff works. We really want to do it, but we know we need more time. So if you have the ability to use this group for the sector so we can engage well and confidently, we really want to do that. But as Rochelle has said, Rome is not built in a day. These are small steps and change does take time, reflection. And we, in our organisation, have advocates to keep having these conversations and a leader who has the courage to be challenged and able to have the conversations. And that's really, really important. As I've referenced, having someone in the team gives us built-in accountability because they're always able to share that perspective. Also important to note that we need to make sure that that person is well supported and able to do that, and actually being able to have not two full-time people. We've got less than one full-time person, but it's two people. I think that's an awesome opportunity for them to support each other. And optimistic and hopeful that we can continue to resource that so it will keep being able to influence how we lead, listen and act as a sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, Rochelle and Rhiannon. Let's go straight to questions. Any questions?
Hi Rachel, my name's Vern. Let me see if I can get my video happening. It was a bit dark earlier. G'day. My name's Vern. I'm a disability advocate at Uniting WA. We're pretty early on in the stages of supporting Uniting service users to share their lived experience in a sort of a program of support. And there's definitely some similarities we're hearing from your program and what we're doing. One of the things that we obviously have to do with being a charity that supports vulnerable people with compounding disadvantages is that when they share their lived experience, we have to take that into account. My question is, someone who's gone through a legal issue may have other vulnerabilities or disadvantages or issues going on. Do you take that into account when you're supporting them to share their lived experience, or is that not taken into account?
That sounds like a very good question. Who would like to pick it up? Rochelle, you've gone off.
Do you want me to answer? Yeah. Okay. Hi, Ben. Yeah, great question. And yes, that absolutely is something that we take into account, which was why it was important for me to bring different opportunities that people can contribute to, because there's nothing worse from experience than being told, no, we can't, you're not ready, or we can't hear your story. So for people who are still going through their legal issues, often they can't talk about them in an open setting. So that's where opportunities to engage in surveys and kind of tell their stories in a different format are available. In terms of speaking and media, then we have incorporated a process to make sure, it's a self-reflection process for the person who would like to engage, and it's a reflection process for us to see if that person is ready, if now is a good time for them. I think sometimes, and I've certainly experienced this, sometimes it's not the time away, like the distance and time from your experience. Sometimes it can be whatever's happening in your life at the time. So, for example, if it's 6 years since my experience, it doesn't mean I'm automatically ready to tell my story. If I've got a lot of stress going on at home and I've got financial concerns and I'm really vulnerable, it's not a good time. So depending on the engagement, I guess, is a short answer. If it's, speaking, media, then we certainly have processes in place for self-reflection and for us to have a chat and see if that's a good time for them. And then we provide support throughout that process. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Rochelle.
I might just add that so legal need is to get access to a free legal assistance service, you basically need to have more than just a legal problem. So if I had a legal problem, I would not be eligible for a CLC service. You need to be experiencing financial disadvantage, and our members unfortunately turn away more people than they can help. So they also assess on things like legal merit and vulnerability and the impact on people's lives. So there is almost always family violence, or risk of homelessness, or risk of losing your job, financial disadvantage, and so on. So basically all the people we work with, there are levels of complexity and intersectionality there. So Vern, I sometimes describe that the people that our sector works with, they're the same people that we're all working with. They're just coming to us for the legal component of the issues that are affecting their lives.
Louise, you were next.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. WACOS is going through a thing at the moment where I'm trying to recruit a couple of lived experience people onto our board. We've done it before, but I have a couple of questions because I have heard from other peaks and other organisations, and I was really impressed that you explained that it was an easy time, all the rest, so don't just jump about jumping straight in. One of my concerns is I work whatever amount I work full time, and I live the sort of the policy work that we actually do. So one of the areas is like I'm just going to take for an example about the policy changes to developing a framework for child safe organisations, or it could be a policy framework around sustainable funding. I'm in it. That's my job. So how much time and effort, because we're going to ask these people with lived experience to come and join our board, but that's not their life. That's not what they do. That's not how they spend, 40 hours a week, looking into this stuff. So supporting them with the expertise that's actually needed. How much is required in that? Because I don't want it to be, what's the word? Tokenistic. I mean, these people, the people do take up these positions, and we were looking for people with lived experience of poverty. Excuse me, of poverty and equity. I'm seeking people at the moment, and I've tried to make the application process really simple. It's a phone call to me. Let's discuss, blah, blah, blah. So it's not some big selection criteria, but how do I make it meaningful that they're not just sitting at the table? And so they also have the knowledge to participate in the conversation.
Shall I start and then you can add? Yeah, thanks for that question. I think one of the barriers, Louise, that we spoke to the sector about when we first came together was, and actually Chelsea spoke a little about this, was that people with lived experience are a really vulnerable group of people that need a lot of additional support to do the work. And I think if we look at trauma-informed practice and being inclusive, we can use some of those principles when we look at employing all staff, not just people with lived experience. In terms of skills, I think it's important to recognise that people with lived experience have really important knowledge, but I'm careful when I say this because this is the words of the group, so I'm just going to say it because this is something we hear often, okay? So people with lived experience do have a lot of skills and expertise in addition to their experience. So I think sometimes there can be the stigma of people with lived experience are just ex-service users, but actually there's so much more richness to that. And generally people, it's getting the right person for the right job, right? So if you're wanting someone for the board and you're wanting a certain amount of skill or expertise with that, then it's hiring that right person right from the start, and then bringing in trauma-informed principles for support in other ways that you might do for other staff as well. Is that helpful? A little bit?
I was going to say something a little bit similar, Louise, in that, so for example, when we hired Rochelle, who has significant lived experience in a range of domains, she also brings amazing project management experience, a background in crisis intervention work, as I think you used to be an AMBO officer and so on. So I think it is reasonable when you are hiring for a certain role, it could be lived experience and. So you might find that you can have lived experience and some involvement with policy knowledge, or lived experience and some governance. It's not coming through?
No, because we're not hiring. I mean, it's great that Rochelle's now a member of your team, and so she would be across this. These are board positions.
Yeah.
No, the board meets 8 times a year. planning, and what we think wouldn't understand, but they're not living it. So like when I have a policy officer in the room discussing something with the board, they've spent, you know, weeks or months working on something to be able to contribute to the conversation. So I'm expecting that I would need to spend a bit of time with those people who do have lived experience. And I'm not saying, it's not that people aren't smart enough or clever enough or don't have the ability, that because they're not doing it. It's not their job. Where, Rochelle, that's your job. You're now employed by this is a bit different. It's a volunteered position on a board. We'd pay, and we'd pay for all the time around, you know, in line with our lived experience framework. But I want to make sure that it's as, you know, what time and energy would I need to put in to make sure it's meaningful for those participants and their contribution as well. So it's all the technical stuff. That's the best way to say, all the technical stuff that's related to our policy work.
I think a good place to start, just to add one more comment, is what do you want from them? What is the expertise you want? And then kind of work backwards from there. Yeah.
Okay.
What is it you want?
I want them to be able to bring in, so it's like reviewing our policy positions and providing a different lens and a different set of eyes that how will this be impacting the people who will, you know, just say our policy positions get adopted, how will it impact them? Are we taking the right position? And it would only be two voices in a, you know, because I'm also very aware that there's limitations on that's two people's perspective, not everyone with lived experience of poverty and inequality. You could have quite a variance of opinions as well.
So we would probably put in the position description for the board member that they have networks and connections that they can draw on, and that part of the role, often around a lived experience advocate or board member or committee rep, is that they are drawing on other people's experiences, not just bringing their own one voice. Like, that's a common role component. Maybe we can have another chat offline. I'm just conscious of the time, and I can see someone else's hand is up.
Yeah, so Louise, we'll follow up offline on that one. You're on mute now. Yep, okay. It'll have, unfortunately, this will be the last question. We're going to sneak a little bit over time. Sabaya, can I throw to you? You've got your hand.
Thank you so much. My question is related to the to hire as volunteer or to the paid position for the lived experience. Before this, there must be some training. It's called the advocacy training, and I was involved to involve the lived experience in a different projects, and we delivered them advocacy 5 days intensive training, and after that we involved them for the different policy making as advocates or as a lived experience. My question for the community legal center, is there any advocacy they started for the budget for this training, or whether they involve the other community legal center in that to get involved these lived experience with the training, because without the training it will more increase the vulnerability these vulnerable people. So my question is for the Chelsea or maybe anyone else who can give the answer for the advocacy training.
I think it's probably best for Rochelle to answer this, but we have done it in a different way to that. So Rochelle, do you want to contribute how we have supported people?
Yeah, so we don't have the budget, time or resources to provide and develop 5 days of advocacy training for our lived experience community. So ways we've worked around this is actually similar to what we were just talking about. So for our co-design steering group, for example, when calling for expressions of interest, one of the it was a selection process, and within that selection process we were able to recruit people who had skills and expertise that we were looking for, specifically for that group, who were already experienced in doing lived experience work. Because we were able to recruit with a selection criteria, we were also then able to recruit a few people who were fairly new to lived experience work, but who we felt would fit in well with the group, and who the more experienced people in the group would be able to kind of role model and learn from. So that's how we've done it. Also, I think coming back to what Chelsea and Rianne were saying about having someone with in a designated role, I've got a lot of expertise and experience that I can bring to support people with lived experience, which I understand not everyone has. So I think it's about, I think when you think about people with lived experience, you have a choice in who you get for those roles. So it's taking time to work out what you want. What do you want from that person with lived experience? How do you want them to contribute? And then kind of working back from there. Well, what does that look like? What skills do they need? Did you want to add anything to that, Chelsea?
No, just that even when we were recruiting for like 10 or 11 hours a week, we found it was quite a competitive field. So, generally we were able to recruit people with lived experience of the relevant area, whether that be poverty or legal assistance. It was the same at WAM when recruiting for committees. And generally, like, there are people out there who've got peer work certificates, have done the lived experience educator course at Curtin, have experience on committees and advisory groups. Like, it's not an uncommon skill set. Like, they're not rare as hen's teeth, I guess. And I think it's okay to ask for what you need for a board or a committee, but you do need to also provide some training and support.
And Pamela, we've run way over time, so maybe if you could put your question in the chat.
Yeah, no, I haven't got a question. I just want to pop in. I've worked for the Family Violence Prevention Legal Service at Southern Aboriginal Corporation for 14 years, and I'm a lived experience as well. And I think you'll find in today's world, women are very open to stepping out now, because the social shaming has, coming to an end. And there is women, I know women from, being primarily in the Indigenous community, but across the board, that are stepping out now going, this has happened to me and I want to speak out now. And I'm going to tell you where the system failed me over the years. So I think it's fantastic that the community legal services are starting to embrace what the Family Violence Prevention Legal Services have been doing for about 17 years now. And I've been incredibly privileged to be in the space that I am, and honour every single woman that has stepped up in that time and will continue to do it. And I think you're all doing a fabulous job. That's all I wanted to say. Okay, ladies, and all the best up there with what you're doing.
Thanks, Pamela. That's a really good sum up and conclusion to the webinar. So thank you.
And I jump on the board, but I haven't got time. No.
How many good women do I know that are absolutely flat out because they're overcommitted? And it sounds like you are too, Pamela. And thank you so much.
We rock it.
Thanks so much to Chelsea, Rianne, and Rochelle. You have put in an amazing amount of work. We really appreciate your time today, and we will be sharing the slides over the next couple of days for those that want them as to help their recollection of the webinar. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel and Waikos. Much appreciated.